Hello and Merry Christmas Eve. My name is Sandy Allnock, and I'm going to be coloring this page today in a Coco Wyo coloring book and showing you the technique that I used in last week's video, but this time in alcohol marker, because I had my own wonderings about whether or not you could use blue for the shading on something that wasn't outdoors and, really cold. So I tried it on this one, and I'll let you be the judge at the end whether or not it worked. So the coloring book that I'm using is by a company called Coco Wyo, and they have lots and lots of designs. They're almost all drawn, as far as I can tell, in this style. Very chunky lines, very simple shapes, and for the most part, they're fine for coloring book stuff. They're great for people learning alcohol markers because they're big, simple shapes, and I do use a couple of these in the new coloring book class that starts on Christmas Day. So I'm using alcohol markers. The Ohuhus are the ones that everybody in the coloring book world seems to use, so I thought I'd use those while I still have these in the house. Long story about why they're going away. I'll post that on my blog, so you can read about that if you're interested. Anyway, the idea here is to draw all the shadows in first in blue, and that's what I did in that other one last week. And the light source here is the fire. I wanted just one light source, keep it simple. There is a lamp on the wall. There's a Christmas tree that could have had extra light, but I kept it simple with just one light source. The way to think about this is not to panic and say, my goodness, Sandy is a nerd about this and she can just do this in her sleep. I can do it in my sleep, but you can do it too. Think about standing next to a fire. If you're standing in that room next to that fireplace, then right next to the fire and on the floor in front of it is where you want to sit if you want to be really warm. If you want to be cooler, you'll sit in the chair. You'll be a little further away, and you'll feel the heat on your arm that's resting on the armrest, your right arm, and you'll feel some on your face. You'll feel just parts of it, and then the chair will hide the heat from you as you're sitting in that chair so that you don't get that hot. It's the same thing for all of these. Just picture how much heat is going to get to those different areas, and then you'll pretty much know how much light is going to get there. And in this particular piece, I have left just the white tips showing, and there's some places when I add the color that I'm going to leave the blue as the highlight. So I, colored right through it, and I might leave more blue showing. And that's on purpose so that I have a secondary color for the light, because not all of the heat that comes off of this, just like all the light, not all the heat is going to be full strength because it's waning as it moves away from the fireplace. So that kind of thinking could work for pretty much anything that you are trying to draw or color. Think about your light source as heat, and then start imagining how far you'd have to be away from it in order to start feeling cold and that sort of thing. So some areas, I picked other reasons for doing the shading the way I did, and we'll talk about the inside of the fireplace in just a few minutes. But once all that was done, I just started layering in the colors for all the other parts. And you might think, well, gee whiz, Sandy, why did you color all that in when you were just going to color over it? Well, because now I can just color and not have to think about the lighting, because I basically already have the lighting established. And all I have to do is color the objects in one color. I don't even have to do any extra blending or anything. I mean, you could add extra blending if you wanted, but this is a way to get through that process really quickly because the thinking was already done in that first step. And the first step might take you a lot longer than it took me, of course. This is sped up, but it might end up being more difficult for you, of course. But as you're learning how to process what lighting is there in front of your eyeballs, you'll get better at it. It just becomes more natural over time, but you have to actually do it. I know a lot of people look at my work and they're amazed. How do you do that with the lighting? And unfortunately, they're not out there practicing it. They're just looking at it and admiring the work. And then when they create their own art, they don't put any shadows in it at all. But if you start moving down that road of putting in, complex backgrounds, shadows, that kind of stuff, it will start to become natural. It just takes a while. So I've worked through, like the browns first, and then went to the greens and the reds. I was trying to keep the colors somewhat simple. The other thing that doing this did for me was keep all my colors desaturated, because basically I mixed every color with a blue. So it means that not any of the colors are going to be super bright unless they're in the light. Like that package has light on it, but it wasn't going to be a white package. So it ended up being a bright red. Everything else that's in shadow ends up being a darker red. And that's just the nature of this kind of color layering. So the yellow was a little bit of a challenge, because I thought, wait a minute, yellow and blue are making green. But as I worked through it and put more yellow into the rug, it kind of made sense, because that yellow would dull out and the blue didn't bother me so much. I started off with the fireplace, making the interior of the fireplace glow. And then I realized I wanted to change that, because all of my studies on fire in the last couple of years, if you've watched this channel, kind of a fire nerd. The outside edges of fire are white. So when a drawing like this outlines the fire, we don't really get that sense of the fire burning white hot. So the fire will be white, and then there will be like oranges and reds around the outside edges, and then some flicks of yellow, orange, and red inside. But you kind of need a blank canvas to do that. So I used a Copic Acrylic pen, which goes really well over top of alcohol marker if you haven't used these before. The white one is just like a must-have. I use it sometimes, and I also sometimes use a gel pen. Kind of depends on what I'm doing, what kind of line I want, because these are most often a little bit thicker than what I can get with a gel pen. But I'm reaffirming the lines because in coloring books, the paper is so soft that the ink bleeds a lot. So you have to get used to stopping a little early so that the bleeding doesn't get all the way to the edge of the black line if you want to leave something white. Sometimes I'm able to do that. Other times, if I'm working quickly, I have to go back in and put the white back into the picture. But students in the coloring book class will recognize what I'm doing with some of these packages and the baubles on the Christmas tree, because we have a whole lesson in the class on doing shading, and we talk about shading different shapes and that sort of thing. And I'm going to pop this video into the class so students will get to see this even if they don't end up watching it here on YouTube. So just getting those lines back in there, waiting for the heavy acrylic that I had applied in the fire to dry. Basically, I was, busy work making the rest of that happen while I was waiting. So you can draw over top of acrylic pen, and that's where I kind of put the lines back in, but in the orange marker, and then outlined the outside of the fire with it. And then I also put in just touches of red, just a little tiny bit of it, and then threw in a little bit more yellow, leaving the center of the fire white, because the center of the fire is the hottest part. I decided instead of having a white blanket, I would go for a green blanket just because it's holidays and, who doesn't like a green blanket at Christmas time? And then at the very end, I decided to add some sparkle and magic to the fire. So, a lot of those little snap, crackle, pops you get from a fire. So there is my finished piece. I will be back on Christmas morning with another video. My second video will be that one. And then I'm going to take a break till the first of the year. So yeah, I will see you on Christmas. And in the meantime, get your shopping done, get the wrapping done, finish all the panicking, and find some time to relax. And remember the real reason for the season. Merry Christmas.